Hello, hello. How are you? I hope you're well. My name is Gail. Welcome to my channel. And today I want to talk to you. I want to offload about my recent trip to Edinburgh. Now, if you follow my channel, I am all about the energetics. I am a self-projected projector, which means that when I speak like this, when I just offload whatever is going on for me, that I hear my own truth in my frequency of my voice. So when you are a self-projected projector, it is recommended that you have a sounding board, someone you can speak to, someone you can speak at, and trust them not to give you any advice or opinions or anything like that. And I find the best way of doing that is recording myself, just generally kind of talking things out, and often I upload that and save it here to this channel. And this is one that I really need to get off my chest. I feel like I'm stuck in limbo until I do this, until I speak this out, because there's a lot of stuff for me to embody from this recent trip to Edinburgh. So that's what today is about. If you are into energetics, maybe if you're into witchcraft, maybe you should stay here, but maybe you shouldn't, because maybe what I'm going to say isn't necessarily gonna resonate with you. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but yeah, it's been an interesting journey, because going to Edinburgh for me, while it was somewhere that my husband wanted to go, somewhere that Matt wanted to go, when we agreed to do it, I was like, oh yeah, great, we'll go to Edinburgh, it'd be a nice city break, blah, blah, blah. And I think if you are someone like me and know of people who are into any kind of energetics, maybe feel like they've got a bit of a past life of maybe being a witch, maybe being burnt at the stake, whatever it might have been, then oftentimes there is a city like Edinburgh that people are drawn to, and a lot of people who I know around this are connected to Edinburgh, feel a connection to Edinburgh, and I was the same. And so I was excited about going to Edinburgh, because I thought it felt like I was going to be going back to almost back in time and reconnecting with a part of me that maybe I'd left behind. And for me, it was going to be, while it was a great time with Matt and we were doing all the touristy stuff, there was this underlying feeling of kind of almost this expectation of activation, of Edinburgh activating some ancestral, ancient kind of story, kind of activating some kind of like inner power to do with like bringing this kind of like witchcraft element and feel to life within me. And that was kind of one of the things that I wanted to gain from kind of going to Edinburgh. And I really did expect to kind of, when we got into the streets and into the old town and things like that, to really feel this kind of activation kind of coming through, and this feeling of kind of connecting to an ancestral line, an ancestral power, an ancestral kind of magic. And that was really what I was kind of expecting, and it really was not what happened at all. I didn't feel it. In fact, I felt such a strong absence of it that I've since realized that is the activation. There was nothing. There was heavy feelings, don't get me wrong, in certain areas of Edinburgh. And I think that goes without saying in nearly every city that you go to, because there were areas for executions, there were areas for torture, there were areas of extreme poverty. And I felt those areas. But what I never felt was this connection. And I kind of went expecting to hear stories of the great witches of Edinburgh. You know, the ones who'd been executed, what they'd done, you know, where they used to meet as a coven in one of the hidden closes, or, you know, where they used to do their rituals, or, you know, a pub that was, you know, built on the site of, you know, one of the coven's meeting places, and that was really kind of like my expectation. And it really wasn't there. It really wasn't there. And I now, looking back, think that potentially my expectations were a bit kind of like mad, really. That to go to somewhere like a city like that, where they were well known for executions and torture of witches, more so than a lot of other places. So, for example, our ghost tour guide did say that there were a lot less rules and boundaries around what could be done, what could be classed as witchcraft, all that kind of stuff in Scotland, as opposed to in England, for example. So hence why there were a lot more kind of like witch executions, torture, etc. up in Scotland, particularly Edinburgh, than in the UK. In England. I've got that a bit wrong, sorry. In England. So it is a place that is known for it. It is a place that is known for witches, you know. We ate in the witchery, you know. That's one of the kind of like the amazing restaurants in Edinburgh, very gothic feel, very kind of heavy ambience, very atmospheric in there. And that was, you know, the reason that it's there is because it's close by to the witches' well. It's at the bottom of Castle Esplanade, where, you know, the witches would have been executed back in the day. And so I really expected this really kind of witchy vibe when I got there. And I expected to hear stories of it. And I expected to kind of like, you know, feel a little bit of like, ooh, energy activation when people were talking about it and things. And it just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. And we went to the castle one day. It was chucking it down with rain. It was cold. We were rushing around. We were just kind of like, where are we? We were just exploring. And so we went up to the castle wall. We didn't go in that day, but we kind of hung around, took some pictures, you know, all that kind of jazz, did the touristy side of things. And then the next day, when it was dry, we could actually see where we were going. We weren't huddled under an umbrella. And I said to Matt, I want to find the witch's well. And he was like, oh, right, what's that? Right, okay, well, it's the memorial for the 300 plus witches that were executed. And it's up around the castle somewhere. So we got to the castle, we had a look around, we couldn't find it. I actually had to get directions to it to find it. And of course, then when you see it, it's the smallest thing. Now, was I expecting something grand? To a certain extent, yes. But of course, really, when you think about it, this is a time in history that probably people want to shove down and forget about, right? And it is still being dulled down today. The kind of power within what it was is being dulled down a lot still today. So back in the day, you know, it was, shall we say, acceptable? I'm not sure if acceptable is the right word. Accepted, maybe, because, you know, witches were evil, right? They were evil. They were evil beings. They were, you know, doing things that were evil. Now, when we look back at those witch trials, we look at back at them as most likely the majority of these people were just innocent people, just normal people. And in actually saying they were just normal people, they were just the healers, the midwives, the herbalists, the whatevers. They were just normal, really, and they were innocent. There is an element where we're still dulling it down, because we are actually dulling down the power, because the chances are, in truth, the women who were executed, tortured, all that kind of stuff, probably weren't innocent of feminine power, but they were innocent of evil and, evil magic, if you like. Because it really was a war on women who knew things, who didn't fit into the structure, who used their feminine knowledge and wisdom and intuition, and were quite, confident in their abilities, mastering their emotions, holding their energy, knowing what they're, being able to, shall I use the word manipulate, being able to manipulate their own frequency, right? So that they could attract, magnetize, just all this stuff, manifest, all these words that we use now that are kind of pretty standard. And we went from this idea that these people were evil to now we're at this idea of these people are innocent and they were just normal, they were just ordinary. They were normal, they were ordinary. But women are not ordinary and are not normal in the way that we think about it. Okay? Humans are not ordinary and normal in the way that we think about it. We are energy transmitters and receivers. That is what we are. We are part of this universal cellular quantum physics structure that means that we are not normal human beings in the way that we have been taught a normal human being is. When you go into the biology of the body, when you go into the biology of the brain, when you go into the physics, when you go to quantum physics levels of humanity, we are not what we think we are. We are much more powerful, and energetics is the key to all that. Frequency is the key to all that. The energy has been cut off. The energy cord has been severed, and the energy isn't activated anymore. So if you know anything about kind of quantum physics, blah, 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 you know that cells react when you give them attention. So when you focus on something, the way that the cells act changes. Okay, so you could see simply by the witch's well that this energy isn't focused on anymore and hasn't been focused on for potentially 400 years. Okay? I didn't feel the women who had gone before. I didn't feel that connection to ancestral lineages, that connection to that ancestral kind of power, because centuries of neglect means that the memory just becomes quiet, doesn't expect attention, honour or truth, right? So it just fades away. The energy just fades away and it just dulls down, it just settles. The other thing is, these women, so women, power, feminine intuition, feminine wisdom, all that kind of jazz, right? But also the ones who were at home, the ones who cooked, the ones who, used herbs for healing, whatever it might have been, right? Maybe they had little books where they used to jot things down. Maybe they used to have little women's meetup sessions where they would share tips and things like that. That died with them too. So there was no passing on of that knowledge, okay? So when these women were killed, we lost knowledge. We lost herbal, we lost ritualistic kind of knowledge, we lost healing, intuitive wisdom. It just didn't get handed down, and that shaped the women that we are today. That shaped along with the control of the narrative, the control of the belief systems. Let me just look at my notes. There's something here that was kind of important there. What did I put? Yes, The witch trials broke the chain of knowledge and destroyed belief systems. That, we lost it. That's what happened with these witch trials. That's what happened when they killed these women and men because they were supposedly evil, is that is when we lost our connection to this, because of the fear of connecting to it, the fear of being seen as someone who connected to it, but also the fact that the knowledge just didn't get passed on. We didn't have the woman before us who practiced this, who could tell us it worked and it was okay. So instead we had the narrative that we were given, which was this narrative that it was evil and everybody was bad who did it and all that kind of jazz. So the witch as well. The first time we went to the castle, we walked straight past it. It was wet, it was raining, I wasn't really looking for it, we were just exploring, we were just feeling into where we were. The next day when we went back, I had it in my head that I needed to find it. And when I found it, I was shocked. I was shocked at how small it was. I was shocked at how many people ignored it and walked past it. And there was something about the invisibility of it, the fact that there was only me who was looking for it. Nobody else was looking for it. Everybody else was just walking past it. Some people even looked at me strange when I was having my picture taken with it, and I was taking pictures of it. And that is because the energy isn't active anymore. The energy isn't active anymore, And yet it's in front of this great big huge castle, okay, which is a monument to royal legitimacy, Christian power, state authority, and military dominance. The energy coming off that was, whoa, massive. The records, the history, the stories in that castle, huge, big, expansive. The witch as well. Most of the women who were killed and tortured, their names weren't even recorded, or if they were maybe lost along the way or whatever. The difference, it's kind of hidden. The memorial's hidden. The information behind it is hidden. The element of it within Edinburgh seems to feel hidden. The message all the time was these women didn't matter. Now, I don't like the label witch, not because of what comes with it, not because of the layers and things like that. And I know that there are people out there who want to reclaim that word, witch. But witch makes this feel mythical, fantastical, as in fantasy. It makes it feel magic, etheric, something different, okay? When being a witch wasn't really being a witch, it was simply being a woman, being human. And I feel like when we give it this label of witch, it feels like something different. It feels like there are men, women, and there are witches. No, there are women who are tuned into their inner wisdom, their intuition, their power, and there are women who are not tuned into it. That is not two different entities. Any woman has this access to this power. This isn't a witch who, comes along and she's extra magical and she's extra intuitive and she's extra this and she's got the clair senses and she's got all that. No, every woman has this power. Witch is a woman. I mean, I know obviously men got kind of pulled into those labels, but a witch is technically a woman. Witchcraft isn't witchcraft, it is being human. Okay? And again, I revert back to the biology of our bodies. Okay? It's feelings. Witchcraft is feelings. It's putting feelings into stuff. It's feeling the feelings of stuff. It's the frequency, the feeling of something. It's seasons, it's moons, it's connecting to all that. It's this feminine intelligence that we have, this kind of like gut feel. You know when someone is lying to you, okay? And I'm not saying that men don't have that too, they probably do. But I can only tell you from the experience of a woman, because that's what I am, okay? It's energy. It's energetics. It's how your cells move within your body. It was energy work before we had the words for energy. It was women who knew things and were punished for knowing things. You know, we didn't have quantum physics back then, but the women kind of got it, okay? And this power comes through when we slow down. When you're rushing, you don't get this power. When you're slow and you're calm and you're in your sovereign energy, you will start to notice this, whether or not you believe in it or not, okay? Witch trials were not superstition, but they were about controlling and eradicating women's power. And we know that, right? You know, that's why it's called history, his story. There is a line in Rebecca, if you don't know right now, but Rebecca Yarros is Empyrean series, literally, whoa, set loads of activations off for me. And there is a line in there and it says something like, it takes one generation to rewrite, to basically come up with the story, to write the text. It takes the next generation to teach the text. And then by the time we reach the third generation, everybody believes the text. Everybody believes the story, okay? And I don't feel like I'm telling you anything new, and I don't feel like I learned anything new when I was in Edinburgh. I always knew that women had power. I always knew, I knew this. I knew that witches were women. I knew that it was feminine energy. I knew that they were the healers, the mothers, the cooks, the herbalists, the, you know, whatever. I knew that. The men went out to work. The women helped each other. That it takes a village, you know, all that vibe is all kind of coming around this kind of like witchcraft kind of vibe, but we didn't have the right words back then. So it became kind of like seen as this mythical thing, and then it's grown bigger and bigger over the years, and the Chinese whispers and and the suppression, but ultimately it is being a woman. It is being a woman. We are synced to the moon anyway with our periods, right? It is being a woman. And I think one of the reasons why witches were generally depicted as being like old is because they were over 50, because they hit the menopause. Because the menopause is actually rewriting your body from being a baby maker to being a energy kind of controller and freak. You know, you have that ability when you are making babies, but when that baby making ability disappears, the one thing you are here for is that energy work. It's that intuition, it's that feminine energy, it's that feminine knowledge and wisdom. And we know, for some reason, we maybe don't know the reason why, but, you know, Christianity came along, and, you know, the men couldn't trust us to, I don't know, use that with them. I don't know. We didn't have this kind of like, you know, equality, right? And the men wanted to be more powerful than women, and, you know, the men were the ones who, you know, went out to work and did the fighting and all that kind of stuff, and the women were just like the lowly kind of, you know, housewife servant-y kind of thing. And so, you know, I could see how women having this level of power was threatening to men at the top, you know? This is where this whole kind of like, because we went to North Berwick before we went off to Edinburgh, and North Berwick is pretty much where the coven was supposed to be, and I did get a bit of a coven vibe at this one, but where the coven was supposed to be, who met and worshipped the devil and stuff, who they So King James VI went to meet his future wife, who was in Denmark, and when they got married in Denmark, and when he was sailing back on the boat, they hit a storm, the boat nearly capsized, blah, blah, blah. He blamed it on witches, and he said witches were meeting at this North Berwick kind of chapel, I'll call it, and, you know, they tried to kind of kill him and his wife at sea. And that paranoia and that kind of, you know, because we couldn't explain away things like a storm at sea, so we had to blame it on something. So there was all this kind of like lack of knowledge around it as well. We went there, by the way. We went to that was the one place where I felt stuff. That was the one place where I did feel kind of like a bit of a connection. And I was like, wow, this feels witchy. This feels like there's something ancestral here. When I went into that like kind of like little chapel-y area in North Berwick. So yeah, I'm kind of losing my train of thought. So let me just, I will pause. I will come back to you. I was expecting witchy from Edinburgh. I was expecting activations. I was expecting tales of witchcraft, tales of women coming together, tales of, you know, I was expecting witchy shops. I was expecting to be able to go into shops and find like, you know, incense sticks, crystals, pendulums, all the things, just nothing. So I went expecting witchy, but instead, the only thing I really felt from Edinburgh was a disconnection, a wound that has never healed, because we are still suppressing that witchy vibe in Edinburgh. We're still glossing over it. We're still telling the tales of Agnes Sampson as, you know, just a midwife or whatever. We're not telling the tale that potentially, you know, women do have power, and potentially, I'm not saying that she did what everybody accused her of. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying by also telling the story that these were just ordinary women, we're suppressing our power again. You know? They probably weren't ordinary women. She probably, right, when she probably cooked her stew, because she didn't have much money, because she might have had kids, she maybe stirred her stew in clockwise or anti-clockwise, and maybe she said words, you know, I really want this to be nutritious for my family. I really want my family to get the most nutrition out of this, blah, blah. You know, in effect, that is spell casting, right? You know? And that wound of suppression still runs through Edinburgh and runs through our lives and who we are as women. That disconnection was really powerful for me. And that was interesting. And that is what is shaping what is coming out of this transition for me. You know? I thought the activation was going to come from all of that witchy stuff, when instead the activation has come from the absence of it. The magic was severed. The story was rewritten, and in that, we as women, the power that we hold was lost. And yes, women are rising and women are seeing this power and we're feeling into it. And we've always had intuition. We've just been told that it was, you know, delusion or something. Silly, daft, whatever, you know? The city showed me what's been lost. It showed me what was taken from us. It showed me what was rewritten. And it showed me what I need to speak about. And it showed me what I need to remember. and what happens when feminine power is written out of history. That's what it showed me. The real story of Edinburgh for me wasn't in the tours, the castle, the bars, the food. It was in the gaps. It was in the missing pieces. You know? And then I come back to this idea again that, you know, this witch label. And I've never felt comfortable with the word witch, and I didn't know why. And I assumed it was the same as everybody else because it comes with all this connotation. It comes with all this bad energy from executions, torture. And as I say, I understand the people who want to reclaim that word and take it back as an empowered word. But it isn't being a witch. It's being a woman. It's being a female human being. We are designed for energy work. Our body is a receiver and a transmitter. We are creators of life. That is powerful. That is powerful. And I couldn't find the witchy stories because there weren't really any. Because the witch wasn't what we think of as the witch. The witch wasn't, you know, stood in a cave underground with a cauldron going, kind of, you know, doing rituals and dropping frogs' legs in it and whatever. The witch was just the normal woman cooking at a stove, putting her intentions into the food. She was the normal woman who was using her feelings to kind of navigate the world around her. And, you know, she was the normal woman who, you know, walked into a room and could read the room, could tell when people were lying. She was just a normal woman. So this normal woman was ripped out of her normal life and executed and tortured and kind of forced to admit things that were just completely obscure, and then executed for it, you know? So the witchy stories aren't witchy stories. The stories would be the stories of just the ordinary woman living life, you know? The accused witches, they weren't magical. They were women living in their full human capacity. You tuned into intuition, immersion, care, influence, presence, and society punished them for it. It was never mystical. It was never magical. It was never evil. It was never something like in a different dimension or thread than we are. It was us tuned into our own power. And that was the activation that Edinburgh gave me. It was the story about the lack of the knowledge, the lack of understanding, and the rewriting of who we are and what we are. That was the biggest activation. And that was the most unexpected part of it as well, because I really did think that the activation was going to come from reconnecting with a kind of witchy vibe, a witchy energy. But instead it was what was lost, what was taken, what was rewritten, and what we need to reclaim as women. And this has been the bandwagon that I have been on for a little while now, but I have been going through a process of relearning, reclaiming. And I think I'm probably at the point where I'm in my power now, and it is time for me to live my life in that power, if that makes sense. And that was the other kind of part of the activation, I guess. So I hope that's been interesting, useful. It will be to me when I listen to it back. And I hear my truth in my own words and all that kind of jazz. So I hope that some of that has resonated, activated an energy within you, activated a knowing within you, so that you can also kind of reclaim your power, a power that was lost 400, 500 years ago, which is insane, really. And it's been kept on the down low and under kind of normal humanity for such a long time. No wonder we're all burnt out and all the rest of it, because we're not living, we're constantly suppressing ourselves, we're not living to our fullest capacity.